as well. Being part of control flow as well. All right. So for today, we'll be looking at the types of loops in Python programming language, and then we'll look at some loop statements as well as nested loops. So similar to conditional statements, we also have certain keywords that when Python comes in encounter with them, it alters the flow of execution, right? So unlike conditionals, where unlike conditionals, where where your code will execute certain parts and skip certain parts, right? Loops, on the other hand, repeat certain part of your program, right? It repeats certain part of your program, and of course, loops are basically the act or the process of repeating certain action. All right. So let's say I assume that today's class is in a loop. It simply means that we'll be repeating this class over and over and over and over and over again. So that's basically what loops is. All right. And as per its name, it works same in programming as well. So it repeats certain section of your code for a certain period of time, okay, or when a certain condition is met. So it repeats that part of that code over and over and over and over again. All right. So in Python, we have two types of loops, right? We have two types of loops, right? We have the for loop and we have the while loop, and we're going to look at each of them one after the other. Uh, we're going to look at how we can repeat our code um, using for loop or while loop, right? But we'll start with the for loop, right? We start with the for loop, and then we'll move straight to the while loop. Right, so basically for loop is used when we want to actually execute a certain portion of our code over time. All right, so I think this will make sense with code sample. So I will go straight to our code editor, and then we carry out some practicals, and then we get the whole idea behind the whole ideology behind for loop and how it actually behaves. So I'll go to my VS Code, or personally I'll go to our project folder where we have our entire code. So we have our code right there, and I'll simply open up this code in VS. I'll simply open up this folder in VS Code. So you can do yours by simply right-clicking on your folder and then opening it in VS Code. Right? For me, I will simply open mine with my CMD. All right, so this is our folder here, and of course, this folder contains all our code that we've written in our last class, right? So I will add a new file here, and I'll call this file class 3, right? Being our third class here, class 3.py. Remember, it's a Python program, and of course, it should carry .py. So that was supposed to be a file, not a folder. So create a new file, call it class 3.py. Right, so that's supposed to be okay. Let's delete this folder off and create a file. Please create a file, not a folder. Call it class 3.py. Right. So within here, we will look at some simple examples and see how we can grab the concept of for loops. All right. So like I said, for loop is a kind of loop that we use to execute certain action based on a number of items in a sequence. Please let me put that down. Or it's there in the slide. All right. So it's in the slide, but just note that down. That for loop is used to loop or to execute certain portion of our code based on a number of items in a sequence. So it executes a certain section of your program based on a number of items in a sequence. So a sequence is basically a collection of items or a range of item. So if I have let's say if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That is basically a sequence of 5 number, right? From 1 all the way to 5. So that means if for loop is to execute a certain portion of our code based on that sequence, it means that it will execute it based on the number of items we have. They mean it will execute 5 times, right? So the first time would be for this number of items there. The second time would be for this number of items here. The third time will be for this number of items, and so on until you get to the last item in that sequence. Is that understood? Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So that's how for loop actually works, right? So it will execute your portion of code based on a given number of items, right? Based on a given number of items in a sequence, right? In a sequence. Then now you may be wondering, how do I create this sequence, right? So okay, so sequence in Python or programming, or when you hear me say sequence, I basically mean any data type that can be looked over or that can be iterated over, all right? That Python can actually iterate, all right? So one of them is a list, but since I have nothing to list, I will not use list. So there's a function in Python, right? There's a function in Python, it's a built-in function. So it comes alongside Python installation. So we can actually use that function to do what? To create a sequence of number, right? So that function is called range, right? So it's built in, it's called range, all right? It's called range. So if you actually use range, you can specify the number of sequence you want, right? So this function takes in a number. So and it will automatically create a sequence of items between that and from 0 all the way to that number, but excluding that number. What do I mean? If I say I need a sequence of 5, right? And then if I assign this to a variable, say variable x equals to sequence of equals to a range that should create a sequence that should create a range of what five elements, right? That should create a range of what of 5 items. Now, if we execute, or let's say if we want to print out what x is or how x looks like, we will get something that looks like a sequence that starts from, oh sorry, this should be small x. Remember variables are what are case sensitive. So this should be small x, right? So big X and small x are two different variables. So that's why we had that error there. So if I run it again, then we have what a range of what of 0 to 5. So now behind the scene or within this range is basically item that starts from 0 and take it all the way to 5, right? And take all the way to 5, and that creates what a sequence of items starting from 0 all the way to 5. So you can create a sequence using what this range function. You can also create a sequence using a list structure, but since I haven't gotten to list structure, we wouldn't want to go there. So we stick with range, right? So basically what I'm trying to say here is that we are going to use range to create a sequence of items. And then the way range works is that it will create item based on the number you've specified. So given this, that we have a code that says x equals to range of 5. So what happens is that Python will automatically create a container that contains this number starting from 0 all the way to 5, but not 5. Meaning that the result of this will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but not 5. Now, if you count that number on my screen, those are 5 elements, or those are 5 items, which of course match the number that was specified for the range function. All right, so we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that is 5 items. And that's how range works. So range will always start from 0 all the way to a specific number that you've provided, but not that number. All right. So you start from 0 all the way to the specified number, but not that number. So that that is how we will create our sequence. We will make use of range function. And then knowing this in mind, we're going to go back to our slide to see how we can structure our for loop. So it's similar to our conditionals, right? Except that for for loop, we initiate a loop using what? Using the for keyword, right? So if you look at what we have there, we have what a for keyword, and then once Python sees that for keyword, it expects the rest of this required syntax, which is the variable name followed by the in keyword. That in there is compulsory, is a keyword, is a built-in keyword, right? So Python says that if you want me to execute a certain portion of your code, that it must be in that way. And then and then the sequence, right? So what am I using to do what to repeat this action, right? That is where your sequence comes in. What am I using, or how many times am I using to do what to repeat this action? So having that in mind, we'll go back and then we'll structure our for loop. So before now, right? Before now, let's assume that we have a code here, say print hello Python beginners, right? Now, if I execute this, of course, this will display what Python beginners, right? Now, assuming I wanted to display this same message, let's say 5 times, I would actually do a come here and do what and duplicate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then do what run again, and it will do what it will show the same thing 5 times. But this will actually make sense, right? If the number was quite small. What if we wanted to repeat this for 1,000 times? Would I have to come and repeat this for 1,000 times? So that's where loop comes in, right? So that's the whole purpose of loop, to repeat your specific portion of code over a period of time. Okay, so we will use for loop and then we'll see how we can repeat this code over a period of time. So so I will assume that this is the portion that we want to do what to repeat over time. Now, Python says that to structure a for loop, we use the for keyword, right? So the moment Python sees for, if you look at my screen, let me zoom this up. If you look at my screen closely, you would see that it automatically throw an error immediately we type the for. That's because it's expecting other parameters, right? And which is what the variable name, the in keyword, and then the sequence, right? The variable name, the in keyword, and then the sequence. So I'll give it a variable name. In this case, I may call it A. You may call yours anything you wish to call. It's a variable, right? But we will come back and then we'll discuss about that variable again. But for now, you can put in any variable name of your choice. So for me, I'll call A from, right? And then what follows after the variable is the keyword in. And then what follows after this is your sequence. Your sequence. So you may have a sequence up there. So I may call this sequence. I may have a call sequence, and this sequence is a range function that should create, right? That should create a list of numbers between 0 to 4, right? So I'll simply put my sequence there. Arrange in what in sequence, right? And then what follows is a column. And with that, you have properly structured your for loop. Now, all you have to do is to provide the action that needs to be repeated based on a number of based on a number of items we have in that sequence. So to provide your code needs to be indented, right? Similar to if structures. Now the portion that needs to be executed when a condition is true is being what indented for that block. So same thing happens here with for loop. So we will indent this for loop, right? And then we come here and then we tap this in, and that becomes our action that needs to be repeated based on a number that we specified in our range function. And then when we run this again, you see that we have Python for beginners 5 times without us doing repeating this for 5 times. Do we understand? Should I explain that again?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So let's look at for loop again one more time. Right, let's look at for loop one more time. All right. For loop, a loop that works based on a number of items specified.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? Right, so I think someone wanted asking a question. Please, can you unmute yourself and ask a question?
Okay. So the question I wanted to ask, is it possible to explain the for loop without making use of that range function? Because the range function is kind of confusing me in a way. Like, is there any example that will not have to do with range function, at
Oh,
least
okay.
before you now add the range?
All right, no problem. That's fantastic. I will re-explain that for loop again. All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Okay, so let's look at it from this direction, right? Right. So now we know that, right, we know that for loop, right? We know that for loop repeat things, right? Repeats things based on number of items in a structure, right? It could be any structure. As far as that structure has a collection of what of items, it could be any structure, right? Let's leave that there as reference. So now let's assume that we have a collection of let's look at let's use the number of participants that we have there, right? So currently we have 37 what participants, right? And then I can now say let's Miss Comfort Affair, right? Repeat a specific action based on the number of participants we have on this call. Probably I could tell her to repeat a certain code based on the number of participants we have on this call. Right. So now what happens is that before Miss Comfort actually starts repeating that action, she knows beforehand the number of times she has to do what to repeat that action. Right. Because before she repeats, I might have told her the number of participants we have on this call, right? So I might say, okay, Miss Miss Comfort, all right, go ahead and construct a if any if statement based on a number of participants we have on this call. So it means that she will have to carry out that code 36 times, right? 36 times. So that's exactly how for loop works, right? So we give it an action and it repeats that action based on a number of items we have in a structure. It could be any structure, right? It could be any structure. So in Python, we have a lot of structures, right? We have dictionary structure, we have list structure, we have a lot of structure, right? So, but we wouldn't go that far because we haven't actually arrived there yet, right? So we're gonna use that range function, right? But then before we move to that range function, let's assume that we have a collection of numbers, right? And then I'll call this number, I'll wrap this number in a parenthesis. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 9, right? Let's say 0, 1. All right. So let's assume that this is what my collection of numbers. All right. So assuming I want to repeat a certain portion of code based on the item that exists in this structure, how many times do you think my code will execute? Anyone? Given this structure, right? And I want to execute a certain portion of my code based on a number of items we have on that structure, in that structure, I mean, how many times do you think my code will execute?
10 times.
10 times.
10 times. Right? That's because we have 10 items within this structure. Right? We have 10 items within that structure. Right. So we could call this structure, I could save this structure to a variable and I will call this variable 1. Right? I could call that variable 1. So anytime I want that structure, I can simply just do a reference variable 1, right? If I say variable 1, I'll have this structure there, right? That's the whole concept of variable and variable assignment. All right. So now, similarly, right? I could repeat this same structure without necessarily typing out this number like that, right? And how would I do that? That's where range function comes in, and I could tell range function, give me what 10 items that should flow like look like this structure here, and range function will repeat exactly that same thing. Right. So range function here will do what? Will create a list of numbers, right, that starts from 0 all the way to 9. That's how range works, right? So it starts from 0 and give you a list of number all the way to 9, right? Now, why is 10 not included? Is because the number starts from 0, and already that's from 0 to 9. That's 10 items, all right? So this structure we have here is what is similar to this structure that we have there, right? These are two different ways of doing of writing it. Now, this range actually looks more convenient. That's because had it been, I wanted this structure to be all the way to 100. So it means I will repeat this all the way to what? To 100. But in range, I could simply just come here and put 100. And it will what? It will create that structure 0 all the way to what? To 99. Are we making sense? Are we making sense?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's why we are bringing that range function, right? To make life easy for us, right? If not, we would actually be doing what? Be writing this based on a number of items what we want, right? So that's how range actually works, right? So behind the scene, that's what is happening. So there is a list of numbers, right, from 0 all the way to wherever this number ends, but explain that number, which in this case 0 all the way to what? To 99. But I'll release this, that's too much for now. So this will be 0 all the way to 9, similar to what? To this same structure we have there, right? And then Python now says, assuming you have a specific portion of code that you need to be repeated. That means before you want to repeat this code, you as the programmer, you know how many times this code should repeat. So the for loop is just like you as the programmer, right? You know how many times this is going to loop. You know when it will start looping, and you know when it will stop, right? That's how for loop works, right? So it knows, because before it actually start looping, you must have done what? You must have provided what? The sequence or the structure that it needs to do what? To repeat based on number of items in that structure. So it knows, right? So now what the problem is that how do we construct this loop to work? So Python now says, in order for you to repeat something based on a number of items in a structure, you can use what? The for keyword, right? So the for keyword. So the for keyword there is the reserved word. So it means that we cannot use for as variable. Not that it's not work, it will work, but then Python but then your program may start behaving in a way that you may not actually understand. So please, we cannot use for as variable. So we cannot use for is equals to 10. That will not work. Already it's throwing what? An error there, because the moment Python sees for, it expects other parameters for the loop, right? So now we're not constructing like this thing here is more like a sentence for so and so, or for items, right? Or for elements, or for variable, for anything at all, right? But for any variable what? In a specified data structure. So when you put that in construction, it will be like this. For variable, so I'll call this variable in, let's say, var1 for once. All right. So now if you read that, that actually sounds like this. All right. So I will change this back to, let's say, element for, so it sounds well, but you can use any variable of your choice. So here we are simply saying what? For elements in this structure, do what? Repeat this part. That's where your action comes in. So in this case, let's assume it will be hello there. All right. So let me go to the end. So basically it sounds like this, right? For elements, it means for each element in this structure, and that structure, what is this structure? Do what? Repeat this action. So if there's 500 elements here, please go ahead and repeat this 500 times. If there is one element there, repeat this one time, right? That's basically how for loop works. And if we execute this will work just fine. So you say it repeats 10 based on a number of elements we have in that structure, right? So it will repeat this code based on that, on the number of items we have before it even goes on to the next code. So let's assume that we have another line down there that says end, or let's say the end, right? The end. So before your code will execute, remember the default behavior of Python is to do what? Is to execute your code line by line, right? So before your code will start from line 1 and execute all the way to line 11. So what happens is that this will execute, of course, this is coming, so your line 1 will not even execute. Line 2 is empty, so nothing is there. So your line 3 here will do what? Will establish that variable, right? And will establish that structure and save it in a variable called var1. Line 5 will do what? Will also establish another structure and save it in var2. Then it gets to line 7, and then Python now sees what? It sees 4, and then it automatically knows that every code under that line 7, as far as that code is being indented, should is the action that should be repeated based on what a number of items that we specified in a particular structure. So Python will do what? We read this as you will also read it, of course. For each item in this structure, repeat this, right? So if there were other code, as far as those codes are indented, it will do what? It will repeat it as well. So it means repeat all of this based on the number of items we have here. So what happens is that it will now go and check. Okay, we have the first item being what? 0. What happens? It will then do what? It will then execute print hello, print hi. Now, usually by default, it should have moved to the next line, but then we still have other items in that structure, and we have what? We have 1. So it will come back again and do what? And repeat this action for item 1, and then go back again and check is there other items, and we have what? We have 2. It will come back again and do what? And repeat this action what? For item 2. It does that till it gets to the last item in that structure before it will even think of leaving that line, of leaving these 2 lines and going to the last line. So if we execute this again, this should work, and then we should now have the end at the end of this. So now we are now having what? We are now having, let me clear this off and let me run this again. So we are now having what? 2 actions to be repeated. The hello and the hi. That is one action that was repeated for what? For item 0. Another hello and hi for item 1. Another hello and hi for item 2. And if you count that, you see that this will be for item 9. And then since there's no other item, the repetition of another one has ended, and then Python goes on to the next line. That's if there is a next line outside the loop. Do we understand? Question.
Yes, sir.
All right. So
Good
that's
evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir, I have a question.
All right.
What if my variable were not to be integers? What if they were a string? How would Python relate that?
Okay. Fantastic question. Okay. So as far as those items are within a structure that Python can loop over, Python will still count it as an element. So it means that even if I come here and I change 0 to, let's say, please, who asked the question?
I'm the one, sir.
That's you.
Precious.
Precious. All right. So even if I come here and I change this name to Precious, right? And somewhere here again have another variable. So what name is that again? Comfort. I used comfort before. David. All right. Say David here as well. David. All right. And say my number 9 was also another string. Say hello. So Python will actually consider each of these as a single item, right? So this loop will still loop for 10 times. So if we execute this, if we execute this, then if we actually count through this is 10 times. Where the first, this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the last one they have there is 10. All right, so you see that is actually complete. So that still works as it should. So what happens is that pressure still becomes what? A single item in that structure. Now, an item in a structure can be of any data type. It doesn't matter. It can be of string, of float, of integer. It can even be this structure itself inside its own self, right? So I can still have a similar structure like this inside its own self, and it will count it as what? As one item. Okay, so that's how it works. So it doesn't matter if it's string or if it's integer. It will count each item separated by comma. Right, please. This is one item. Right, so this is the P is not one item of place. The item here is each after each comma. So even if I had a lot of things here, as far as this comma comes after, this is considered as one single item. All right, is that understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so any other question? Any other question? Mr. Victor, you have question? All right. I don't think Mr. Victor has question. All right. So let's continue, right? I thought I met Mr. Victor. Okay. So there is no other question. That's fantastic. All right. So now,
I have a question.
okay, Mr. Andrew, go ahead and ask the question.
Please, the part you put print the end, what is that for?
All right. So I was actually trying to say that but the default behavior of Python is to execute your code line by line. Right, so by default, this will have executed once, this execute once, this will go once, and so on until it gets to what the last line. But now we have for loop, right? We have a loop here. This happens to be what? A loop. So it means that before Python will get to this line, that it will repeat your line and 8, your line 8 and line 9 up to the number of items we have in that structure before it will even think of coming to this line. All right. So that line is outside your loop, and then I was trying to explain to us that this line here will repeat itself till you get to the last item before this line even execute. Unlike the normal or the normal behavior of Python execution of code. All right. So this line, your line 12 will wait till all the lines within your loop finish executing before any other line after that will start executing. So that was why we put in that line 12 there. Is that understood? Okay, so I believe that is understood.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
All right. So similar to that, we can as well use the range function, right? So you can still change this to 2, and our code will still work, because behind every range function is numbers that exist between 0 all the way to that number, similar to this structure. The only difference is that the range function cannot accept other data types. So the range function only accepts numbers, right? Range function only accepts numbers. So its structure are always numbers, 0 all the way to the last number that you specified. So that's basically just the difference. So other structure may have other data types within it, but range only have one data type, and that is integer data type, the int, right? So it starts from 0 all the way to the specified number, but not that number. That's 0 all the way to 9. So we can still use var2 here, and this will still work, variable 2. And then when you execute this, we still have that our code still works as expected. our code still work as expected. Question. All right, so for someone that I think I can't remember who asked the question, but someone said that he can't find his play button here. So what you can simply do is you can go to your view and then open up your terminal, and then your code should execute automatically. Now, if you open up your terminal here, right, and then your code doesn't execute automatically, what you can simply do is you want to make sure that you are using CMD. So if you look at where my cursor is at the moment, you're seeing what's PowerShell, right? Now you want to switch this to a command prompt. So you want to come down to this here and then click on it, and then you want to select command prompt, right? Not PowerShell, command prompt. So when you select that, so you're now in command prompt, right? And then what you can now do to execute your code is you can now say Python, and then of course the file that you want to execute, which in this case is class3.py, and your code will do what will execute. But this seems to be a long protocol though. But for any reason you can't find this in your VS Code, then there's a problem, because it should be there. If you can't find it at this point, I would say maybe you should try reinstalling your VS Code again. Then that should come by default, because it should be there by default. So probably you must have tampered with something, and then that goes. So try reinstalling, and that should come back. Or you can still follow this process that I just showed you, and that will work. Right. So I can't remember who asked the question, but that should solve your problem. All right. So that for for loop. Right. So for loop is that simple. Is that simple. So remember, for loop works. It executes an item based on a number of. It executes your code, a certain section of your code based on a number of items in a specified sequence. So one thing again, please don't miss the next class. All right, don't miss the next class, because the next class, what we'll be doing would be live coding. Throughout that class, we will be writing code, right? So let's not just learn and go and keep it, because I'm beginning to have that feeling that most of us are just carrying it and go and keep it. So next class will be live coding all through, right? So we bring question, we write code from beginning all the way to the end of the class. So we put what we've learned from variable all the way to loops into practicals, right? So please, for any reason, do not miss that class. All right. So that's that for loop. That is that for loop. So let's look at the other loop that Python has offered us and see the difference between them. So okay, so this you can read that up. So remember I said a sequence referred to what an ordered collection of elements. So as far as you can collect an item orderly, then that sequence is good to go. That you can use as your sequence. Right. So the range function, of course, I've explained that how the range function actually works. So it will create it creates a sequence of numbers, right? So what happens is that it will start from 0 all the way to 5. So down here is that that is the default behavior of range. But then if you want to actually change that default behavior, you can provide two numbers, like what I've done here, 1 and 5. And then range will not start from 0 again. It will start from 1 all the way to 5, but not 5, right? And then you can also provide 3 numbers as well, 3 arguments to the range, and that becomes your start and end and step. Let's just do one practical with that, and we'll see how that goes. All right, we'll do one practical with that, and then we'll see. Okay, so let's see again. Let's look at that range again. So I'll simply just bring this down here, so we got for easy recognition though. So I'll put that there, and of course that's similar to what we just did before. Into the before we made use of the variable var2, but this time around we just carry the value of var2 and just put it there instead of what of the variable itself. So that's the same thing we did as before. All right, so now let's look at what happens again. Now, another interesting thing about the range function is that for each time it will repeat your code, it assigns the item that is currently acting as as a reference for repeating that code. What do I mean? If I come into my loop and then I want to display this element variable, right? Because this element variable actually holds a value, right? So even if we never used it, but then it has a value. So you can print it inside your loop. You can print that value inside your loop. Then you get to see that that value would be each item in that structure. It will be each item in that structure. Okay, so let me start with bar1 first, so we could see it clearly. So we could see, since we clearly see the items on bar1, so let's just use bar1. So before moving to bar2, right? So for each time it executes your code, the element in that structure is being assigned to what, to your variable, to your loop variable. That is that element there. So if you use another variable name, then of course the value is still assigned to that variable name. So if we execute this one more time, what do we see? We see what? We see precious, followed by what? The action. Then we see what? We see 1, followed by what? The action. We see 2, followed by what? The action. So that happens in for loop. So for each time it wants to execute your action, right? The variable here actually is the item in that structure is actually being assigned to the loop variable. So in this case, since we have this structure here, and then we're now telling Python repeat this action based on the number of items we have in this structure. So what happens is that for the item precious, the action does what? Actually repeats. That's why we are saying what? Precious, followed by what? The action. And then for the next item, we have what? 1, followed by what? In the action. Of course, we have 1, followed by what? The action. So for each item, it assigns it to the loop variable. So that happens by default. Okay, so you cannot alter that behavior. That behavior happens by default. Is that clear? Should I say that again? Should I say that again? Do we understand?
No, sir.
Please
We
say it
don't
again.
understand.
Go ahead, please. We don't. I'm lost.
Okay. All right. So now, if we look at if we look at let me close this. Now, if we look at our code here, right, we have a variable here that we never used in the loop before now. We did not use this loop. We not use this variable before now. Right. So Python would just take to put a variable there for fancy, right, or to put it there for putting sake, right? So Python actually makes use of that variable in some way, right? In some way. Now, what happens is that before Python will execute, remember this is a loop, right? And this action that is given here should repeat based on a number of items we have what in whatever structure we provide there, which in this case is in this structure. So it means that this action here will repeat based on a number of items we have what in this structure. So it means that for item precious, this action will do what? Will repeat. For item 1, this action will do what? Will repeat. For item 2, this will do what? Will repeat. And it will continue in that way till it gets to what? For item hello world. And then this will do what? Execute. And that will do what? End the loop, right? Now there is something that's happening behind what? The scene. So there are things that are happening behind the scene. One of it is that Python automatically assign each of these items to this variable before even executing your code. Right. So if you want to execute this code for item precious, this variable here has access to that item precious. If it's executing this action here for item 1, this element here has access to what? To item 1. If it's executing the action for item 2, this element here has access to item 2, and we can view this item within our loop, right? We can view it within at any point within our loop. We can view that item, and to view it, we can just simply go anywhere in our loop. Within our loop, we can just print the element. We can just print this element there. right? And it will show you the current item for that specific action. And then when we run this again, we will get to see that we can have access to what? To precious, to 1, to 2, to 3. So it assigns each item to the variable for every time it loops. So that is what happens behind the scene. And this action is automatic. It happens by default, right? Is that clear now?
Yes, sir, but I want to ask a question.
Okay.
I'm asking the question because my system is not on. So if I should impute on my system for item in variable 1, print item, it's still going to come out in this manner. I mustn't use elements, right?
Yes, it will come out in this manner. So this could be I, this could be anything. So if it's I, then this could be I as well. And then you can just run this. And that will still work. So you see that still works as it should be. So remember, this is a variable. So a variable could be anything of your choice. Is that clear? Have I answered your question?
Sir. Yes,
All right.
sir.
Any other question? Any other question? No question. No question.
Okay, go on, sir.
All right. So let's now look at the range function again. All right. So basically, I could just if you just want to actually show the items on that is on the structure, then you could just simply actually remove this and it will work as well. You see that we have all the items there listed out for us. All right. So now let's look at this range function again. All right. So I could also choose this to be var2. I remember range function only works with numbers, right? So so this would be a list of numbers from 0 all the way to 9. So the default behavior of range is that your numbers will start from 0 all the way to 9. And you can actually alter this by providing two values, like 1 comma another value, right? Value 1 comma value 2. Now what happens is that that your value 1 must be lesser than your value 2 by default. It should be that should if we swap this up, this will throw an error for you. So your value 1 must always be smaller than your value 2. Okay. And then what happens is this: it will alter the default behavior of range starting from 0 to 9. This will now be from 1 because it will assume that 1 is what it should start from and 10 is where it should end. So you can now say that we now have 1 all the way to 9. Okay. So that's one thing you should know about range. Right? So it can take multiple arguments. It can take 3 arguments at a time, and it will still work as it should. All right. So let's look at while loop. All right, while loop, the other loop of Python, the other loop for Python. So while loop is quite similar to for loop, right? It's similar to for loop, except I'll copy this and put it down here so for reference point, so we could use reference while loop. Except the way while loop works is that it repeats things based on not number of items in a structure, but it repeats things based on a condition. You see, it's quite similar to for loop, but then it's not that it repeats things on number of items in a structure. It repeats things based on condition. And we say that in programming, what exactly is condition? What exactly is condition in programming? What exactly is condition? Anyone? Condition. The condition we talked about on Thursday. No one. Sorry, on Wednesday. Condition in programming. No one. No one.
So you said a condition is any expression that will result in a Boolean result. That is
Exactly.
the truth table.
Exactly. So that's how while loop works. So it works off on on conditional statement, on expression that must result in true or false. That's how while loop works. Right? And then for a loop to start its work, your condition must be false, right? Sorry, it must be true. So please put that down, note that again, that while loop works based on condition and and the condition and the condition must be true, right? So by now we already know that that how we can write expression that can only result in true or false values, right? We know that 3 plus 3 can never result in true or false. 3 plus 3 will always result in 6, right? And 6 there is not a conditional, it's not a Boolean value. So but then when we count expression like 5 less than 10, of course this will result in a true or false value, right? So by now we already know operators that we can use to do what, to construct expressions that will result in true or false value. So those expressions that result in true or false value, like Messi said, are conditional statements. All right, so while loop works with those kinds of statements. All right, and the structure for while loop is similar to for loop, similar to for loop, similar to for loop. Right. So I think we have another answer to that in the comment section by Obichuku. Obichuku, you could have just unmute and then just speak. Right. So that is a very fantastic explanation of what a Boolean, of what a conditional statement is as well. Okay. So for those of us that don't know, please you can reference the comment section and put it down for future use. Right. So the way while loop works is similar to how for loop works, right? So to initiate a while loop, we use while. Similar to how we initiate the for loop, we use what, for. So while loop, we initiate it with while. But then while loop does not actually expect this kind of parameters. What it expects now is a condition. And then the action to be executed. You see, while loop is quite simple. The syntax is very straightforward. All right, while and then condition. So this condition here could be, let's say, while name is equals to Messi, because Messi answered the question first before, right? So I'll assume name to be what, to hold the name Messi, right? So while name is Messi, I want this code to do what, to execute this, to execute while loop. So you see that this will do what, execute this code, right? Because this expression here will evaluate the what, is it true or false?
True.
True, exactly. So because this is a condition and this condition is true, will be true, right? Not is true, it will be true upon executing this code. This condition will be true. That means this action here will be executed, right? Will be executed. All right. So I will try this. All right, and I will break the code itself, because this is what we call infinite loop, which we'll talk about. So if I execute this loop here will loop from now to the end of time, or from now to whenever this PC goes off completely. So if I execute this, of course, you see that loop is still looping, right? It is still displaying. So you can see that how tiny this thing is down here. You can see how tiny this thing is. So you see, so that means the loop is still looping. So this is what we consider as infinite loop. So it will loop from now to the end of time. Let me break that. Okay. That can be interrupted with Control C. So if I tell you ever run into an infinite loop like that, which we'll talk about, you can break it with Control C. That command still works for Linux users and for Mac users. Control C, and that loop will end. All right. So now the problem here is this, right? The problem here is this, right? Now, for each time while loop executes a specific action, right, it goes back to validate, is that condition still true? And if indeed the condition is still true, it does what? It executes again, and then goes back again and check, is the condition still true? If it's still true, it does what? It executes again, and then keep doing that till whenever that condition is no longer true, right? So from what we had here, this condition remains true from now to the end of time, because when it comes and check, is Messi the same thing as Messi? Yes. It does what? It executes. And then it does what? It goes by again and check. Is Messi the same thing as what? Messi? Yes. It does what? It executes. It keeps doing that till whenever that condition they must changes to what? To false. Right. So we should always be careful about that. That's one thing about while loop. Right? While loop, there's always a possibility of ending in an infinite loop. Right. So it is important that when constructing your condition, you should find a way to terminate that condition within your loop at some point. At some point. So this termination must come within your loop. Question?
Can the broken, like when it gets to a particular point, can you tell it to stop?
I mean, when the while loop gets to a particular point, if you can tell it to stop.
That, like, is there a command you can give to the while loop to stop the action?
Yes, yes, and that's what I was about to actually tell us, that it is important that when establishing a condition for a while loop, you should find a way to terminate that condition within your while loop. So inside your while loop, there should be something that should execute something that should end that condition, right? Something should come up somewhere and something should happen somewhere, and then the condition should do what? Should turn false, right? Should turn false. So at this point, I could just make this loop to execute once by simply saying, after checking if this condition is true, execute this. Then after executing that, I want name to no longer be Messi, but then name should now be, who asked the question, please? The last question, who asked the last question? Obada. So one name now to be Obada. Obada. All right. So at that point, you see that this code will likely execute once and then end. So when we run this, you see that it showed while loop once and the loop ended. That's because immediately after executing the first time, it went back to check, is name still Messi? But at that point, we updated the value of name to what? To Obada. So when it's now going back, it's now saying is Obada the same thing as Messi, which is not. And then what happens? The loop ends automatically. The loop ends automatically. Interesting. Question? Question? No question. No question. Sorry?
So the question I have is that I noticed that you place the name locally inside the while loop. So a situation whereby you change the name to a global name, like you did not indent it under the, what's it called, the while loop.
Okay.
Will it still execute? Will it still check the name that it is saying now, and then execute it, and then like after, when it sees Liberty, it stops. Sorry, when it sees Obada, it stops.
All right. So the thing is that if your statement to terminate or to turn the condition false must be within your loop, because if we take this out, right, if we take this out outside that loop, you will see that Python will not have the ability to even pass through this line to get to this line to do what? To terminate that. So this will also totally confirm. So the ability of Python to come down here to validate, to change name to Messi, sorry, to change name from Messi to Obada will never happen. So as such, anything that needs to be done to change the condition to false must live inside your while loop. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is that
Okay, I
okay?
also
Okay, so I believe that is okay. Miss Precious, please go ahead and ask a question.
question, please. I also noticed
Is
that
that
when
Precious?
you're no John, you can please.
Okay, ask. Okay.
Okay, I noticed that you skip lines. I don't know if it's intentional or it's part of the programming for Python.
All right. Mean these lines here.
Okay, for instance, you have
Like all these
where you have
spaces.
18, you skip 19 to 20, and then to I don't know if it's intentional or
Okay. Yes. Those spaces are intentional for
hello.
Sir, we can't hear you again, no.
what's up. Please ask your question.
I don't know if
Yes,
I'm the one
ask your
that
question.
lost you, but I can't hear you anymore. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay.
I lost you for a moment.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. John Ekandem, these spaces here, they are intentional. It's for readability sake, right? For readability sake, right? So it doesn't really matter if it's there, if you skip the space or not, right? So it still works. Is that okay? I think I've lost him again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Miss Precious, please go ahead and ask a question. Miss Precious. Miss Precious, it's hard for us to hear you. No, I cannot hear you. He said, if it's possible for us to do what? Okay, so I think we lost Miss Precious there. Any other question? Any other question?
Yeah, hello, good
Okay,
evening.
so I'm just being curious. Okay.
Okay.
Hello,
Yes, ask your question.
hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me, please.
Yes, I can hear you. Ask your question.
Okay, all right. Please, I don't understand. How did you arrive at Obada? Because when I run it on my system, I'm still having while loop.
Okay, so like I was saying that when executing your code, right? When executing a while loop, right, and you have a condition that is true, right? Now, within your while loop, there should be all right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right, so I think I've lost my screen there. All right, so let me try and put that up. While that is coming up, All right. So I was saying that how we arrived at Obada was if you have a well condition, right? If you have a well condition, that you have to make possibility to to terminate your while loop condition. Because if you don't do that, your while loop will keep executing from now to the end of time, like what is happening currently on your device, I assume. So what happens is that you need to find a way of changing the name from Messi to Obada at some point, right? At some point within your well structure.
Your screen is not showing. Oh,
Okay, let me put that on. Give me a second. All right, so sorry guys, my screen is taking time to come up. It will come up soon. Give me a second. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Mr. Anthony, is he still active on this call? Mr. Anthony, are you still active on this call? Anthony Collins.
So I'm active, sir.
Okay, so I think I. All right, so Mr. Anthony, you have sent a message. We just check through. Share my screen.
Yes, sir, I've done it. I've done it. I've done it. I've done it.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can
Yes,
see
yes,
your
sir. I can
screen.
see your screen.
All right. So quickly, let me explain this again. All right. So I was saying that now how we arrived at Obada was if we have a conditional a condition like this for the while loop, right? We should if we have a condition like this, we should provide a means of terminating this condition at some point, right? We should try to make a way where that condition will eventually turn false, right? Where that condition will eventually turn false at some point. That's why we do what we came inside the loop and then said that at this point, after executing this, let name now be what Obada. Now, someone asked, why didn't we just put the name outside the loop? Well, and make it globally, right? Now, this wouldn't have worked because what will happen when while loop executes, right? It will evaluate this condition, and this will be true. And what happens? This will execute. Since there is no other code after this for the while loop, it will go back again to the condition to check if it's still true. And then when it comes back here, of course, it's still true. So it comes back again and does what and repeat this. And since there's no other code again for the while loop, it goes back again to confirm if the condition is still true. And it keeps doing that. So that will not actually work, right? So to validate, to make that condition turn false at some point, we need to make this part of the loop. So this should be part of our loop. All right. So at this point, what happens? It will confirm is name Messi, yes. And then what happens? It executes. But since this is part of the loop, so it will do what? It will change name from Messi to what, to Obada. So when it's going back, it's now going back to check with what, with Obada. So that it's now check is Obada the same as Messi, right? And it's not. So that loop will do what will end. So meaning that this loop here will do what will execute just once. That was why we brought in that name equals to Obada there. That was to make our condition at some point to turn false. Is that okay? Should I say that again?
Yes, sir.
It's okay, sir.
Okay, so I'm just being a bit curious, sir.
Okay.
Is it possible to continue after termination? If for
If the
whatever reason one wants to continue.
no, once the while loop actually terminates, that loop has ended. All right, that loop has ended. It will move to the existing to any code after the while loop. So if there's any code after the while loop, it continues with that code. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other question? My screen is off again. Wonderful. Any other question? Any other question? Okay, so me, I want to be China Zong. Please ask your question.
Sorry, sir. My question is, I have two questions. Is one regarding when you are doing the for loop, you said
Okay.
that var1 is a structure.
Okay.
But I wanted to know, what's the difference between an array and a structure, or is an array a type of structure? I just wanted to get that clear.
All right. So an array is a type of structure. Okay. An array is a type of structure. Well, I think from next week we will look at data structures in Python, and we'll look at these other kinds of structures in Python. Right? So when we get to structure, we will look at it closely.
Okay, thank you.
But for now, an array is a part of structure. It's a type of structure, I mean.
Okay, so just one more thing. I came into the class around 7:30. I got what the admin was saying about onboarding on the LMS. I just wanted to know if there was something I missed apart from the LMS.
Okay, so do not write on the screen. Do not write
on the screen.
Yes, annotation. Right. During classes like this, there are people that just sit down. I think not in this class though. In another class. I think that should be UIX. I think. Can't remember. So someone sat
Writing on
down.
the screen.
Yes, someone there's an option if you check closely, annotation, where you can actually use for, right? So someone sat down and then drew diamond. And the thing was that whatever you draw will just stay on the screen for everyone. So
Okay. Okay. Apart from that, nothing else.
Yes, nothing else. If there is, I will update us in the group. Nothing else for now.
Thank you.
So any other question? Please, my screen will not come up again. Any other question? Because we're already running up about 10 minutes more. Any other question? Okay, China, Azam, your hand is up. Please ask your question. Yeah,
okay, so someone did ask. I don't know if you saw it. If it's possible to use the while loop to loop through each letter in the name.
If it's possible to use while loop to look through each letter in the name. No, it's not possible. Remember, if you are looping through an item in a structure, that's where for loop comes in. While loop works strictly on condition, except you want to verify that each letter is it's an expected
structure
kind of letter. Okay. Except that, but then you still need a for loop. That's where maybe your while loop will go into your for loop. So you can actually combine both for loop and while loop. So where you put your while loop as an action for a for loop. That's why I said that if you're on next class, please do not miss it. Our next class will be practical all through. So you can't use while loop. So you can use while loop, yeah, to look through each letter. While loop works strictly on condition. Any other question? 9 more minutes. Question. No other question.
So.
Okay.
My question for the previous videos.
Okay.
Is there a link to it?
Yes. Yes, I believe of those videos have been uploaded on YouTube. Those videos are there.
You said it's on YouTube. Is it that when we get to YouTube, how do we know that that is Python class?
Okay, so I think that YouTube is segmented. Okay, so it's segmented. You will see a playlist for Python beginners. Okay, it's segmented.
Okay.
Okay, but I would go through it and then I would drop this link on the for or drop the link to the playlist rather on our group. So that should work. Okay. Any other question? Me, I think Gaius, your hand was up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please ask a question.
It was me that asked that my VS Code was having issue. I reinstalled it. It's still not working. So should I delete and re-download?
It's not showing the play icon.
Yes, and what you said I should do, that other method using the terminal, it didn't work either. I think I need to download it. Yes.
It didn't work either. Okay, so what you want, what I want you to do for me is to select an interpreter. So what you will do is go to your VS Code, click on any file, probably this file that you're working with now.
Sir?
Are you playing?
I should click on
No, control plus shift plus P. That should give you a pop-up. Have you seen that?
Control E, Control Shift E.
Control shift P.
Control Shift P.
Yes, that should give you a pop-up. And then what you want to do is you want to select interpreter.
Okay.
Have you seen that?
I'm coming.
What you want to do is you want to search for interpreter.
Control Shift P.
Yes, Control Shift. And there should be a text box. You can just search for interpreter. Did that work?
Okay. Nothing much. No, I did not.
Did you see select Python interpreter?
I didn't see it, sir.
All right. So did you uninstall and install again?
Yes, I did.
You went to remove programs and then you removed your VS Code.
I did not remove the program.
Okay, you close the application and open again.
I closed it, reinstalled and opened it again.
No, first then go to remove program on your Windows setting. If you're using Windows,
okay.
Remove program. Remove VS, then uninstall it completely, and then install it back again.
Okay.
Let's run the .exe file of it again. Then follow the installation process. Please, there's a part that says add VS Code to path. Please take it. Any installation you want to carry out as far as programming is concerned, right? For this,
yes,
and this one is for everyone. As far as programming is concerned, any application you want to install and you are requested if you should add that application to path, please check it and add it to path. You may need it one day. You may need to access that application someday in your command prompt. So please always check that box. Okay, always check the box. All right. I think I saw someone's hand, another person's hand. I think. All right. So there's no other hand up. So I assume that is all the question. I assume that is all the question. Okay. So like I said, Wednesday practical. So I will come up with some real world, close to real world projects, and we will apply the ones that we've learned, and then we'll build it. Trust me, this code I will not have it beforehand. In fact, it comes with your own come with your real world ideas. We may have to use like about 10 minutes and get some project ideas from us, and then please that project, whatever project idea you are bringing should be between the range of for loop while loop, between the range of loop conditionals and what we've learned. Right? Don't come and tell us that we should do NASA in Wednesday class, please. So we build small project that covers what we've done. For that, this is to reinforce what we've learned for the past 2 weeks, for this week, for last week, and this class. So it will be really helpful because I think from my experience, because I've tutored in KodeCamp for about 4 years now, I've been there in 2.0. So from last experience, I think if we apply more of practical session, it will really help us a lot. So please don't miss that class. For any reason, don't miss the class. So I'll see us on Wednesday, 5 p.m. West African time. Have a good night rest and bye.